A former child star slams P. Diddy with a disturbing civil lawsuit. He alleges the singer sexually assaulted him at a Hollywood party. Speculation is stirring about who this star could be as the horrifying allegations against P. Diddy continue to pile up. We're breaking down the lawsuit with Johnny Depp's attorney Ben Chu, who says Diddy isn't out of the woods just yet. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. Another sordid allegation added to the docket in the case of Sean P. Diddy Combs, the disgraced rapper now serving time in federal prison for a sex crimes conviction. But the newest allegation in the Diddy case comes from an unlikely source, a former child star who says Diddy performed oral sex on him at a Hollywood party when he was still underage. And this brings forth a whole host of questions. Like, for instance, could P. Diddy face more criminal charges relating to these accusations? Is his current conviction relevant to these accusations? I mean, does it bolster them? Where does this civil case fall in line with the rest of the civil cases he's already up against? And above all, who is this celebrity child star? Well, the latter question is all speculation because the former child star has filed the lawsuit under John Doe. So we don't have an actual name, but we do know that it's a male who was reportedly already famous when the alleged incident happened. According to the lawsuit, the boy started his career acting in about 2004. Plaintiff, meaning John Doe, immediately began working in the entertainment industry, securing initial roles that provided early professional exposure and experience. The lawsuit alleges the boy was on some high-profile shows, but it doesn't specify which shows. It does, however, say the alleged incident happened involving Diddy back in 2007, meaning the boy would have had about 3 years experience in Hollywood at the time. Now, according to the filing, the boy reached out to his agents for help with his career, and this is common in Hollywood. They arranged different networking events where he could go and mingle and meet people, and it was all basically to build visibility with other actors, directors, and celebrities. And that, according to the court docs, is how he met P. Diddy in 2007 at one such networking event in the Hollywood Hills. The suit titles this section as, quote, the attack on plaintiff, describing what allegedly happened. According to the child star, he started off at the party by mingling with people and then noticed P. Diddy talking to some other actors who were in the crowd. But eventually, Diddy allegedly approached the boy. Diddy and the boy began talking about his career, and then Diddy said the boy could be a good candidate for an upcoming project. Defendant Combs told plaintiff he wanted to speak to him privately about some potential opportunities that defendant Combs had in mind for plaintiff. Defendant Combs guided plaintiff to the back rooms of the event. Defendant Combs and plaintiff went into one of the back rooms together. Defendant Combs shut the door to the back room behind them. At this point, Diddy allegedly gave the boy some alcohol. And I want to pause here to note, if you followed the P. Diddy trial at all, you know that multiple witnesses testified that Diddy allegedly plied them with alcohol that was sometimes drugged. Multiple other civil lawsuits allege that Diddy forced survivors to drink alcohol that had allegedly been drugged in order to sexually assault them. According to this most recent filing, John Doe alludes to a similar situation. He says that Diddy gave him some alcohol and then allegedly began touching him and rubbing inappropriate parts of his body. Unexpectedly, defendant Combs started to touch plaintiff. First, defendant Combs began to rub on plaintiff's arm. Plaintiff told defendant Combs that he did not feel comfortable with the way defendant Combs was touching him. Defendant Combs tried to relax plaintiff and continued to touch plaintiff, moving his hands down plaintiff's body, beginning with touching his arm and then down to his stomach. It all culminated with Diddy allegedly performing oral sex on the boy, who once again was a child at the time, while Diddy allegedly touched himself. Defendant Combs then pulled up his pants and told plaintiff he would see where they would go from there for the role that he had in mind for defendant Combs' project. Plaintiff was in shock and pulled his clothing back up. After this, the boy was left completely alone. According to the lawsuit, he was in total shock, so he waited for his ride to come and then he left. P. Diddy is listed as a defendant in the lawsuit, but so too are some of the talent agencies for their alleged involvement. The child star alleges it was their duty to protect him, and they didn't. In fact, the adult agents allegedly didn't even attend the party and instead encouraged this child star to go alone without a chaperone. Plaintiff is informed and believes, and thereon alleges, that defendant Combs and agents spoke prior to the event in order to conspire to create an event disguised as an industry meeting in order to provide defendant Combs with an opportunity to come into contact with minor children like plaintiff. Plaintiff believes that the agents knew that Diddy had a reputation for sexually assaulting children and urged the boy to attend the party anyway. Now, this lawsuit was filed on Monday, June 8th in Los Angeles Superior Court, bringing forth a slew of allegations, including childhood sexual assault, sexual battery, negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, violation of the Ralph Civil Rights Act, negligent supervision of a minor, and sexual harassment under Civil Code 51.9. As a result of the above described conduct, plaintiff has suffered and continues to suffer great mental anguish, shock, emotional distress, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, feeling of self-blame, hypervigilance, a loss of sense of trust, and relationship and intimacy issues, and was prevented from performing daily activities, work, and obtaining the full enjoyment of life. And this next line in the lawsuit really stood out to me. It says, this assault was so extreme as to go beyond the bound of decency and be regarded intolerable by civilized society. John Doe filed the suit demanding a jury trial and an unspecified amount of damages, but it's unclear why John Doe wanted to file this now of all times, and that's something we're going to talk about during our interview. It's interesting timing for sure, given that P. Diddy faced a slew of civil lawsuits starting way back in November of 2023 when Cassandra, or Cassie Ventura, filed the Bombshell lawsuit that opened the metaphorical floodgates in the case against Diddy. And I'd argue if Cassie hadn't filed her suit and Diddy hadn't settled 24 hours later, most of the other lawsuits wouldn't have been filed, and maybe the criminal charges would have never even been brought. But alas, P. Diddy was charged federally back in 2024. Last spring, he was tried in the Southern District of Manhattan's federal court on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And I was there when the verdict came down. It was a total shocker. P. Diddy was found guilty only of transportation to engage in prostitution. He was eventually sentenced to 50 months in prison. So that's where he is right now, in federal prison serving out that sentence. But it really begs the question as to why John Doe decided to file this suit now. Leading up to Diddy's trial, there was a flurry of civil lawsuits against him. Some accusers even testified on behalf of the United States government. But notably, Diddy was not charged with any child sex crimes. No charges relating to having sex or sexually assaulting anyone underage, despite the allegations that were put forth in other lawsuits. And I'm wondering if maybe that was a factor in why John Doe waited to come forward. Then again, the allegations date back to 2007, so he had time to think through what happened and weigh his options. Either way, P. Diddy himself has completely denied the allegations. His team told local TV station KTLA-5 the accusations are, quote, false and ridiculous. His team released a statement saying, quote, he's just another hater in a long list of people trying to get in on the money gravy train encouraged by personal injury lawyers. Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted anyone, and that includes any child. These allegations will be disproved like all the rest. So that's Diddy's stance, but according to the LA Times, investigators on the West Coast are taking a closer look at all of these allegations. The Times reports the LA County District Attorney's Office has been reviewing sexual assault allegations against P. Diddy, and that the LAPD and Sheriff's Department have presented two separate cases for possible criminal charges. So is this John Doe case involved? Could P. Diddy face additional charges, maybe even state charges out of California? I don't know. These are all questions I need an expert opinion for. So let's bring on one. It's friend of the show, civil attorney Ben Shue, who you probably recognize from repping Johnny Depp in the civil trial of the century. Ben, great to see you as always. Thanks for coming on. And here's the question I have to ask you. Why now do you think that this John Doe has brought this civil lawsuit? The timing is kind of interesting to me.
Well, a cynic would say that he's brought it now because Diddy is in prison and it's much harder for him to fight it and deal with his attorneys when he's in prison. That would be the cynical view. But it's certainly a question that Diddy's lawyers are going to be asking this now young man at his deposition, among many others.
Yeah, to me, I just was kind of going through the timeline when I was researching this case because the Cassie Ventura lawsuit came out in November 2023. Then in 2024, we had you on like a dozen times when we were talking about the literal dozens of lawsuits. Then Diddy was eventually charged, more lawsuits coming. So the timing is kind of weird to me. And another thing that's kind of interesting to me too, we've seen other John and Jane Does. Some people have come out with their names, like Lil Rod, for example. But to me, this person says that they're a child star, they're famous, and yet he's going as John Doe. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I really don't like the John Doe process in California. I've dealt with it in California and in other states. I had a case not too long ago where in Virginia where the plaintiff proceeded on a John Doe basis. We successfully moved to have him named. That motion was granted. And shortly after it was granted, we realized we got all kinds of calls, going to the identity of this person and a lot of the misdeeds that he had committed. And it led to a prompt settlement. So I think that it is unfairly prejudicial to a defendant because the defendants are all named. They get all the consequences of being named and the plaintiff doesn't have any accountability. Now, I do understand it, Sierra, in the context of a minor, but this plaintiff, by definition, and in the text of the complaint, is no longer a minor. There's no good reason why his identity should be shielded.
And just to explain this to our viewers, when P. Diddy is served with this or his team, whatever, they get, this lawsuit and it says John Doe. Did they actually get to know the identity of this person or is it simply just John Doe to them too?
I suspect, I mean, Diddy is well represented. They will have a very good idea as to who the John Doe is. But it's still what it denies his lawyers and investigators the tips that you get in these cases. So in other words, if, as I suspect, they move to have John Doe's name made public, they will start to get a lot of feedback from the public at large as to who this person is in terms of his credibility. It's just making the defendants fight with one arm tied behind their backs, and I just don't think as a matter of due process it's fair.
And again, to remind our viewers, this is a civil lawsuit. These are allegations. He doesn't have criminal charges involving all of this. But isn't it kind of tricky to bring a case like this? Because according to this child star, John Doe, this happened back in 2007. Obviously, we're now in 2026. If there was any cell phone data, maybe they have it still, cameras or video, like things would be a lot different now versus then. I mean, do you think, obviously, there's a different burden of proof when it comes to a civil case, but isn't that an uphill battle bringing an allegation like this from, more than a decade ago?
I agree, because they will have the burden of proof. The plaintiff, the John Doe plaintiff, will have the burden of proof, whether it's by preponderance of the evidence or clear and convincing. It still will be his burden, and it will be harder to carry that burden in light of, as you said, there probably would be spoliation or destruction of any contemporaneous communications at the time, if any, and some of the technology was older than in any event. So I think that is a disadvantage to the plaintiff. But it also, I've been on the other side of these, and it's harder for the defendant in a he said context because some of that evidence that could have been available to be exculpatory for Diddy and the other defendants is also gone. And you have a situation, if the jury is sympathetic or believes that something happened, they may disregard the jury instructions and may want to reward this plaintiff. So I think that will be something surely defendants will go out in deposition of this John Doe. We understand you were a minor, but you were a prominent minor. You weren't without resources. Why wait so long? And as you said, why wait till after the criminal trial and after he's prison? I think there are going to be a lot of tough questions for this plaintiff.
Yeah, the timing of it all is so strange because we saw even more additional lawsuits after P. Diddy had been convicted, like in the interim between the conviction and his sentencing. But now, I mean, in June 2026, it's kind of honestly a random time why he came forward now. And not to say that, there are issues as far as sexual assault survivors. Sometimes, they have to go through therapy or whatever it may be, not to, belittle that situation and coming through with it. But I do think the timing of it all is kind of interesting. And I hate to say it, P. Diddy has had a lot of allegations like this. He does have a sex crimes conviction, of course. There are a lot of other civil lawsuits like this. But I'm wondering if all of that matters in terms of this case, meaning in criminal cases, we talk about prior bad acts, whether that would be allowed in the trial. Let's say this goes to a jury trial. Can they learn about past convictions or prior bad acts, etc.? Is that something that would be relevant here?
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be all kinds of fights, procedural fights that you're just forecasting here. I mean, everything, as you know, will come in deposition testimony. All of this stuff will be fair game. All of the bad acts, real and imagined, um, of 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 Diddy will come in. The issue is what the judge will do on motions in limine and how much of it he or she will allow in the jury to see. And those will be very hard fought battles. Generally, as you know, propensity evidence is not admitted because it's deemed, though relevant, it's deemed overly prejudicial or more prejudicial than it is probative. So there are going to be a lot of big battles. Assuming this case makes it beyond summary judgment, there'll be a lot of big battles on in motions in limine, and there are going to be a lot of battles that the other defendants. We talked about this a little bit before we went on camera, but the John Doe is also suing the agents, and I think some of these allegations are extremely strong, alleging, for example, that the agents were in a conspiracy with Diddy, essentially to sexually assault this then minor. Those are extraordinarily serious charges to make. As you said, they're in the civil context, and they enjoy a certain qualified immunity because they're made in the context of a complaint. But that does not immunize the plaintiff or his counsel from California's state court version of Rule 11 or a sanctions motion. Those are very, very strong allegations, and they better have something to prove it.
Okay, we gotta talk about this. I can't wait any longer because, of course, people are gonna click on this to hear about P. Diddy, right? And the allegations against him. And when I opened up the lawsuit, I figured, okay, we're gonna be hearing a lot about P. Diddy. But as you just pointed out, some of the other defendants listed are these talent agents or agencies and their alleged involvement. So as I'm going through reading this, I'm like, okay, P. Diddy did XYZ, allegedly, whatever. And then the conspiracy of it all. I mean, with P. Diddy, we've heard some crazy stuff, okay? Accusations, most of it. But in this case, John Doe, this child star, is claiming that there was some sort of conspiracy with these talent agents who knew, allegedly, that P. Diddy was known to sexually assault young children. Basically, they set this up under the guise of a networking situation, basically handing this child star to P. Diddy on a silver platter. Again, all allegations in the civil side of things. But that just kind of blew my mind. And I know you touched on it there, but they're really going to have their ducks in a row to prove that, right?
Absolutely. And if I were the judge, I would focus like a laser beam on that. You and I have both been before judges where who will ask, say, what is your basis for the allegation in paragraph 48,
Right.
that the talent agency defendants were involved in a conspiracy and had knowledge that Diddy was going to perform these acts. Remember, as you said, let's go back in time. This is long before the recent convictions. And I think a judge is going to really push plaintiffs' counsel on that. And if I were representing those defendants, I would file a motion.
Yeah. I do have to wonder too, because if we're going in the timeline of P. Diddy, there have been a lot of allegations. There obviously were the federal charges and everything. But I really pinpointed all back to the introduction to conflict was when Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit in 2023. She opened the floodgates, and then all of a sudden, all the other people came forward, and then the charges came. The investigation first with the FBI raids, and then obviously we all know what happened. The rest is history. But I'm wondering if in a case like this, that there would maybe be a criminal investigation. I mean, when they're bringing the civil charges, we've seen this in other cases where they bring the civil lawsuit and then it leads to criminal charges. Do you think it's the duty of investigators in LA or the Hollywood Hills where this allegedly happened to take a closer look at these allegations?
Great point. I think there'll be public pressure to do just that, because these district attorneys, these are politically fraught um, issues. And I think it begs the question, if there isn't follow-up on the criminal side, why didn't you do that? So I would think that it could well instigate a criminal investigation and more discussions with this John Doe and the prosecutors. So that could well proceed on a parallel track. And that could also lead to a stay of this case. We have seen where there is an ongoing prosecution, oftentimes the judge will stay the civil action because you've got Fifth Amendment privilege issues. So, for example, um, Diddy's counsel could say, look, there's a criminal investigation. He's got his Fifth Amendment privilege. It's unfair to make him testify in the civil case when he's subject to potential criminal jeopardy. So things can get very complicated. And if there is a criminal investigation opened, then I think this could throw a spanner in the works in terms of slowing this civil case down.
You brought up such a good point here, the fact that he faces so much. I mean, I remember reporting on the actual federal trial at the time, and it was kind of like, okay, these civil cases are going to kind of take a backseat. Basically, what you were saying before, the problem at hand is these federal charges. We got to finish that, and then we'll move on. And so I'm wondering where this new lawsuit by this John Doe child star will fall compared to all the rest of them, because he already has this large docket of other civil lawsuits. I know that his team is obviously working for, sort of litigation or settlements or whatever it may be. But like, again, it begs the question, why now? What does John Doe expect? Like this to go to trial soon? He's in jail. Like, I guess, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, California tends to be slow. Back here in the East and in Virginia, for example, you get fast adjudications. We've got the Eastern District of Virginia, which is called the Rocket Docket, where you get a trial within 6 months. California is slow. So this case, even putting aside the backlog of other civil cases, pending against Diddy, the complication that he is in prison, the potential complication of a new criminal investigation, this case is going to take a long time.
And this next question is speculation too, but Diddy had a top-notch defense team. I mean, he pulled out all of the stops. That cost him a pretty penny. And we know that P. Diddy obviously had a hefty bank account, but he spent a lot of money on that. I know there's been a lot of other civil lawsuits. He's got his team constantly working. So I'm wondering, how much could John Doe stand to even win in a case like this? If P. Diddy has to have settlements in a dozen or more civil lawsuits, is his bank account dwindling? Could John Doe even see any payout? I mean, what do you expect on that side of things?
Yeah, I'm not intimately familiar with what he has left. I understand he had a substantial fortune, wildly successful entrepreneur and musician and producer. So there certainly was a lot of money before all of this started. And as you said, Sierra, this has to be really have dissipated his funds. Then that begs the question whether there's any appetite on behalf of his side to settle. There doesn't appear to be. I read a report of his counsel immediately responding quite strongly, whether truthful or not, that these are completely frivolous charges. And of course, we have no idea,
Right.
the merits. We don't know anything as to whether these are righteous or not righteous, but he's giving all the appearance that he intends to fight. The other the other pockets into which John Doe is trying to reach, of course, is the talent agency. It was interesting, and I'm sure you noted that the first count in the complaint is negligence. Why? Why do you lead with negligence and not something stronger? Well, you lead because of insurance coverage. Because as you know, the insurance carrier for the talent agency is not going to cover intentional torts. They do cover negligence. So when you're in the plaintiff's business, you often, as you know, lead with a negligence count so you can, so that the defendant, in this case, the talent agencies and Diddy, they can go to their insurance carrier and say, this is a covered event. And then you haggle with the insurance company as to whether they're going to pay for the defense or whether they're going to pay for your choice of a defense lawyer, and then ultimately whether they're going to indemnify. So that's why I think you see the least serious count almost always invariably as the first count, because that's what, as a plaintiff's lawyer, you want the defendants to be covered by insurance. So they're hoping maybe that even if Diddy's resources are dwindling or the talent agency's resources are dwindling, they still have insurance coverage, or they might have insurance coverage.
And as you pointed out, we're still so early in this. I mean, it was filed on Monday, I believe, June 8th. And, as you pointed out, P. Diddy's team is like, I'm ready to fight. We'll see what happens. I mean, will this go to trial? Will it be a settlement? Will it be covered by the insurance? I don't know who's to say, but I do think the timing is worth noting. And the allegations against the talent agency, too. Ben, I was very interested in what you had to say about that. It's worth noting at the very least. Ben Shu, thank you for coming on Scandal and walking us through this case.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.